Excuse me. Okay. That's muted. Good. All right. We'll check that. Okay, so I will begin the meeting at 7:05, just for. Okay, so my apologies all for the slight delay in starting, but because I am both chairing the meeting and managing admittance to the Zoom simultaneously, I did want to allow for anyone who wanted to log on to the meeting to do so, give them a few minutes. I'm Paul Lagasse. I am chairman of the Historical Commission in HARB. This is a joint meeting of the Franklin Township Historical Commission and HARB. However, we will begin with the HARB portion of the meeting, and because not everybody here is properly identified, I will identify the HARB members, members of the community who are interested to know that. That would be Nan Latimer, Lou Mandich, who thanks to the miracle of misnomering is showing up as Paulin Willa, and whoops, and Jeff Vogels. I note that Solicitor Mark Thompson is in attendance, and that two community members that I'm familiar with, 3 local community members I'm familiar with are in attendance. I don't know if I'm right in assuming that Wayne is Mr. Wayne DeFrancesco, who is the applicant. And I would like to know, Sophie Gill, since you're not Sophie, I'm not hearing you. Is your volume down? I don't think mine is. Let's see. I don't have. No. Lou, can you do me a favor and say something and make sure that I'm getting a sound check?
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Is that-
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. So,
I'll try again.
yes.
Okay, there we go. Yes, my name is Sophie Gill is a 15-year-old high school sophomore. This is Michael Gill,
Okay.
not a 15-year-old high school sophomore. I am an attorney with Buckley, Bryan, McGuire, and Morris in Westchester. We represent the DeFrancesco Appleton Trust.
Okay. So will you be representing the trust during this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to do a quick count aside. We've got, I guess, what I consider to be 4 members of the public. Okay, so for those of you familiar with the agenda, the next item we have, it would be public comment. If anybody would like to make a public comment on the item in the agenda, they may do so at this time. And also, if you do want to make a public comment, I would suggest that for my sake, you perhaps raise your hand and not necessarily all talk at once. I know that nobody wants to, but I'm saying going forward so that we can keep crosstalk down to a minimum. We are going to skip the approval of the minutes from the prior meeting because we're going to wait for the rest of the historical commission members to join us before attending to that. And as noted, we are going to pull forward the certificate of appropriateness review for 3327 Appleton Road. The township received a request for a permit for demolition for the property, which is in the historic district, which is why we are discussing this on our agenda tonight. I would remind everyone that the Historical and Architectural Review Board is merely an advisory body to the Board of Supervisors who will ultimately make the decision concerning the appropriateness of the permit for demolition. The only thing that we have in hand at present is the permit. So is there anything else that Mr. Gill, that you would
Yes.
to be presenting?
Yes, I have some documents that if I can be allowed to share my screen, I will make reference to those throughout our conversation.
I can, yes, I can do that. I had requested in the letter to Mr. DeFrancesco of October 24th that such materials be submitted to us by, let's see, what's the date on this? November 4th, so that they could be distributed to HARB members prior to the meeting. We do not have these. Is it going to be possible for us to get copies of these should we want to review them?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And I would point out, just for the record, that this request was no different than the request in the first letter that was sent for the, the letter that was sent for the September meeting, which ultimately was canceled when the continuance was requested. Before I would like to get back to you in a second, Mr. Gill, if you don't mind. Only because I would just like initially to review the property history of 3327 Appleton Road. Because this did not come in as in a manner that generated a COA application, and because none was ever filled out, unfortunately, you don't have a sheet which shows the typical process that we follow. What we would like to do, what I would like to do now is attempt to follow that and proceed just a little bit. And then I'll give you an opportunity to make a presentation. So if you bear with me, Mr. Gill, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add, if I may, is Mark, I did send over to you just a couple of days ago, the COA information sheet. So I have that as part of the documents that I could share on the screen, but that's the only thing I would add at this point. But please, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that information, so I can't.
I apologize, Paul. I did forward that on to the township manager, so somehow that might not have made its way to you.
Okay. Yeah, I was in today actually and asking, and it seems to have gone astray. Okay. Well, if you have, Mr. Gill, you said you had this in the submitted application. I mean, the first couple pages are not particularly necessary. What I would just like to note is normally we would have attachments to the application. We will add photographs, and we will add the historic resource survey, which was, and you may not have this, Mr. Gill, because I shared it with Mr. DeFrancesco, and so we may be shipping things around in ways that they're not getting to everyone, and I apologize for that. And we will have eventually a streetscape, which is really going to be another photograph.
I do have the Google Street View up here on my screen, and I can share my screen.
Well, hold on one second. Let me.
Sure.
Let me. No, this is. I'm using a borrowed computer, and we operate under somewhat different rules when using a township computer than I would with my own, and I need to figure out how to allow you to share screen on this computer. All right. Oh, that just went away. Okay, that's not helpful. I can share my screen. Oh, darn.
I think if I may, if I can just, I might just be able to share my screen, and then you'll still be able to speak. Just because I'm sharing my screen doesn't mean that.
Okay, well, I don't know whether I have to permit you or not, but go ahead and give it a try.
Okay.
And
no, it does say host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
yeah, and so I'm trying to figure out, hold on.
Sure.
Okay, I found it. All right, you should be allowed to share your screen now. Let's hope.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So that's obviously the Google streetscape view. I have other documents, but please go ahead.
No, so, yeah, so what I would like to do is simply talk for a minute about the historical significance of the property. And, so without going into every last detail on the property history, the earliest known property owner associated with the land is Elizabeth English, and that is 1762. The property passed to the Morrisons, and by 1860 was owned by Davis Hanna, who is the owner of this house, which dates to the early 1800s. He was a postmaster for Franklin Township, well, actually for Kemblesville, which was then part of New London still. And he was one of the lead signers of the petition that led to the establishment of Franklin Township in 1852. He hit hard times, and his lands were subject to sheriff's deeds in 1863 and 1864. We know that the lands subsequently passed, according to Brios Atlas, to W.J. Kennedy. And this house is listed in the historic district as the W.J. Kennedy house because the Brios map forms the basis for the historic district. The house itself, absent the porch, which is now down, is a largely unaltered period structure that, as I said, has been dated to the early 19th century on the basis of the building's architecture. It is a federal period brick house influenced by the Greek Revival style that was popular in the early 19th century, and is one of the oldest houses in the district, as well as a core property in the center of the village, which is the crossroads around which Kemblesville grew up. That crossroads, which is now the intersection of Appleton and New London Road, also defines the historic district, which seeks to preserve and protect surviving buildings that form historic Kemblesville. The earliest known photo of this house is in a postcard entitled The Triangle, Kemblesville, PA, number 501, which was published by Ed Herbener of Newark, Delaware. We don't know the exact date of the publication of the card, but it was postmarked February 1st, 1917. And at that time, the house looks nearly identical to the current house as it's shown in the historic resource document that dates to 2004. That picture shows the porch. So that's a brief summary of the historic structure and the historic importance of the house to the township and the district. Now, what did you have in mind? What would you like to present, Mr. Gill, in terms of the applicants?
So if I may,
Request.
again, my name is Michael Gill. I am an attorney with the law firm Buckley, Bryan, McGuire, and Morris up here in Westchester. And as I mentioned, we do represent the DeFrancesco Appleton Trust regarding this property. My intention was to go through a briefer history of, or at least my understanding of a briefer history of the property, but if it was going to be much briefer than the one that you just offered, I was simply going to, for history purposes, you'll bear with me a second. Sorry, I'm just navigating my way through various windows here. Make reference to the Borough map from the 1880s, and there in fact is the property itself as part of the larger Kennedy property, sitting just to the south west of the intersection of, as you said, New London Road and Appleton Road presently. The street view is, as we were just looking at a moment ago, bringing us to a more current history of the property. The site, which is larger than just the portion that we're here talking about tonight, is the subject of a subdivision and land development plan, which was for which Wilkinson Builders obtained approval to develop several single-family homes. I'm just going to bring up here a portion of that land development plan, which includes several notes regarding what's referred to on the plan as the existing house on Lot 4. Those notes contemplate, as you can see up on the screen, repointing of brick, replacement of shutters, painting work, and replacing portions of the roof. Since that plan was approved, the property has passed into the hands of the trust, and that's obviously the current owner right now. There has been a history of allegations of demolition by neglect. I know that there's been a series of appearances before the district justice. I know that there have been appeals of those appearances to the Court of Common Pleas, and where we find ourselves today, just bear with me a second, where we find ourselves today is needing one way or the other to start a conversation with the township, specifically with HARB, about what's going to happen to this structure. Over the summer, the trust did obtain from Area Engineering Incorporated, which is an engineering shop in Elkton, Maryland, a structural inspection of the building. And it's that structural inspection that we'll be more than happy to share with the township, but I'm just going to bring up on the screen here. Before I do that, there it is on the screen. But before we get into that report, the trust thinks that any present consideration of this property has to take into account the condition of the structure itself. And whatever that structural condition might have been at the time when Wilkinson got the plan approved, and we think that some of the issues that are outlined here on the area engineering letter most definitely had to have been present at that point in time. These do not appear to be problems that have developed by what the township might call demolition by neglect. These rather are long-term issues, at least they appear to be to us. Any consideration of what's going to happen with the property going forward needs to take into account the current condition of the property, structural and otherwise. I do think it's important to note, because I'm afraid that there is a misconception. And I do think it's important to note that this is not a situation where the trust has not done anything to care for the property. That is if that is the conception that is out there, then that is a misconception. The trust has in fact spent in excess of $10,000 simply on shoring up the foundation of the structure. So that, however, as we'll see as we go through the area report, is but a drop in the bucket of what would be required in order to get this building back to some form, some shape in which a certificate of occupancy could be issued. In fact, it's our understanding from the township code official that even if we were to do the work that is outlined on the subdivision and land development plan, that work in and of itself might not even be enough to get to the point where a certificate of occupancy could be issued for the property. So we find ourselves in a situation of asking, what are we going to do here? Because the cost estimates that have been obtained so far to do the work that's outlined on this area inspection report ranges from $200,000 to $270,000. And we can certainly talk more about this as we go forward, but I think we can all make the leap for purposes of discussion here that investing $200,000 to $270,000 in the remediation work that is outlined on this report is not going to yield an economically feasible rate of return for the trust. So we recognize the historical importance of the property, and nobody on this call and nobody within the sound of my voice should presume that the trust does not acknowledge the historical significance of the property. It does. But we do think that there needs to be some recognition coming back the other way that the condition of the property is such that, and I'm not talking about demolition by neglect, I'm talking about the structural condition of the property is such that it would require a relatively massive infusion of capital just to get it to a point where, again, just addressing the issues that are in this report. So we're faced with a rather daunting task. We're faced with the fact that money has already been put into shoring up the foundation, and we need to have a discussion with HARB and with the township about the direction of this going forward, because this sort of constant issuance of summary violation notices, appearances before the district court, this sort of constant back and forth isn't getting anybody anywhere. So that's the point of the submission to HARB. That's the conversation that we're hoping to begin with you this evening. And we can go on from there. Finally, I do want to just make reference to the porch itself, because I know that a lot of the or at least my understanding is that a lot of the consternation here has to do with the fact that the porch was removed without HARB approval. I think everybody is aware that, and if you're not, then this is the statement. I think everybody should be aware that that porch was removed in an act of vandalism, actually multiple acts of vandalism. But as you'll see as we go through the HARB report, the removal of that porch by a prior tenant is the least of the concerns with regard to the structure. Let me just get rid of that.
May I interrupt here? You've asserted that the removal was done by a prior tenant. Do you know who did this?
I do not know the individual's name, no.
Okay, so it's a prior tenant. We don't know who the tenant is, and the tenant has not been pursued for damages?
That is correct. My understanding is that it would have been a futile effort to try to pursue damages from the tenant. In other words, though there might have been some remedy there under the lease, and it might have been possible to obtain some judgment against the tenant for damage to the structure, again, my understanding is that the likelihood of actually recovering any funds were nil. The likelihood of that was nil.
And how do we know that this tenant did this damage?
Because my client is the owner of the property and the landlord, and has informed me of that. And I don't have any reason to suspect that that information is incorrect or untrue in any way. I also don't have any reason to believe that the property owner would intentionally pull down the porch. I have a, number one, I accept what my client tells me. Number two, I don't know that there's any rational reason why a property owner would intentionally and actively and so blatantly and visibly damage their own property. That defies logic to my mind, but
all of that said, you are essentially asking us to accept this on faith.
well, I'll answer that this way. If this process is going to proceed in what hopefully won't be an adversarial way, I do think that we're going to have to, both the trust and the township are going to have to accept a lot on statements. And again, I don't have any reason to conclude that what my client has told me is incorrect. And I don't have any basis to believe that there's any rational reason why a property owner would intentionally damage their own property in such a blatant, visible, and obvious way. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, just for the record, I would say I haven't suggested who did it. I'm simply asking how we go about confirming who did it. But leaving that aside, and while I do understand that in order to resolve this, we do have to have a sense of good faith and in each other. Nonetheless, I think that up to now, perhaps there's not been as much as one would like to justify that, but perhaps there can be going forward. In any case, I would like you to continue with what you intend to present. I would point out, I am going to have to read this at another time. I'm looking at my screen, which is a township computer, and it's much larger than my own personal computer. And this is too much to take in too fine a print for these.
I understand. I understand completely. As I said, your ordinance provides for a review process, and that review process certainly by code gives you what I hope will be more than an ample opportunity to review all of the material that that the trust will submit.
Right. So one thing I would like to say going forward is that I would very much like to have all the information you would like to have us review as soon as possible, so that our members would have a chance to look at it. We are going to be entering a situation in which it's the holiday season, and so the more time we have to look at things, the more helpful it would be.
Can I ask if there was a insurance claim made on the porch situation?
There was not.
Can I ask why?
My understanding is that there was no insurance policy available against which a claim could be made. And I will confirm that, and we can certainly provide further information in that regard, but that's my understanding.
Has there been any other engineering study done other than this one, which we can't read, that's in front of us now?
This is the one that I have. I'm not aware of any others. There have been conversations with contractors regarding cost, but we don't have a written report in that regard. And as I said, this is a document that we will be sharing with the township, and you'll have an opportunity to review it as part of the process that's outlined under the code, under the Chapter 11 of the Township Code.
If I would just like to follow up on Chuck Phillips' question concerning insurance. I'm intrigued that there was no insurance on it. It is my understanding that there was a tenant in this property until about sometime in 2017.
I'm not sure of the dates, but yes, there was a tenant in the property. Yes, and it's the tenant that was, again, we believe responsible for the removal of the porch.
If I can interject here, I'm looking at this letter here where it tells people that we shouldn't be trespassing and this and that, and then there's a number we can call. I've been involved with old buildings for over 50 years. I'm not a builder, I'm not a structural engineer, but I do know a series of resourceful contractors. And I would like to read the engineering report, and then I would like to be permitted to tour the property with a few of those folks and see what it would cost to stabilize the property. I'm not talking about restoration. My guess is that if Mr. DeFrancesco had gotten off his butt, pardon my language, and stabilized the property when he should have done so, that the water leakage and a lot of the things that are wrong with the property now would not have occurred if he had done that when the tenant moved out. I'm sorry, but I don't like to have our collective time wasted by him stumbling and, forgive me, paying lawyers when he could put the money into stabilizing the house and avoid all this nonsense. And that's my opinion, not the opinion of the committee.
Well, sir, I'm here to begin a conversation with the HARB, and I am not here to engage in name calling or placing of blame. My understanding of the past interaction is that there's plenty of that's already happened.
I agree.
I am here, however, to represent my client's interests, and I would appreciate it very much if we could keep this conversation in a tone of civility, and rather than one of dismissive tone about what the trust has or has not done. As I said a moment ago, it is a complete misconception that the trust has done nothing relative to the structure. That is not true.
Do you have photographs of what was done that you could
Yes.
send to us?
Can I ask a question? Excuse me for interrupting both of you, but the work that was done to the property, at what point in time did it occur?
I will have to confirm that, but I believe it has been recent, i.e. within the past couple of years.
So it's quite possible that the work that was done to the property actually occurred after the court cases began and after it was ordered that there be work done to the property?
Well, I'm not sure that there was ever an order that work be done to the property.
Mark?
Excuse me, if I could just be allowed
Sure.
to continue
Go
that
on.
answer.
I apologize.
There have been allegations made about demolition by neglect, and those allegations have each time been either adjudicated at the district court or adjudicated at the Court of Common Pleas, and monetary fines have been imposed. I'd like to suggest that if we're going to proceed in a manner of good faith, that the time for that constant citation or citing of the property owner should at least take a pause while we continue this conversation.
Well, if I may just, I'm all for good faith, but the problem I have with asserting that, there's been work done to the property by the property owner is well taken, but it concerns me that in some ways it's a misrepresentation. If this has happened in response to a court case, it doesn't necessarily indicate that.
Let me just stop you there. My client has just informed me that of the timeline, and that statement is that the work was done prior to any citations and more work had been done after the citation. So the work did commence before the history of citations began. None of which I think is, I guess what I'm hearing is that there's some kind of assumption that because the work was done, it doesn't count if it was done after the very actions that the township took to encourage the work to happen were begun. So in other words, we want you to begin this work. We're going to attempt to compel you to do the work. You do the work, and now we're going to treat it as if the work didn't happen. That just doesn't make sense to me.
We
No,
wouldn't do
Mr.
that if we-
Gill, if I could just add, you know, the issue concerning when work was done, we can certainly interject that into this hearing, and the issues related to the citations that the township had successfully pursued. But we're here, I mean, the HARB is here to hear the case that I believe you intend to make concerning the request to demolish the structure, rather than engaging in more back and forth about when work was done. And Mr. Lagasse, I mean, if you want to continue, that's fine, but perhaps Mr. Gill can just present what he intends to present so that at least the HARB has something to consider.
I appreciate that very much, Mark. I think that makes sense.
Your point is well taken, Mark. My concern, the point that I'm trying to make simply is that I think that there is a problem of trust here. And if things are going to be asserted, I would like to have solid evidence concerning them. And to that point, I think it will be of value to any final decision, any recommendation made by the HARB and any final decision by the supervisors, that there be some confirmation concerning this engineering report by having somebody from the township take an independent look at it.
Certainly would agree with that assertion.
And we don't oppose that. Obviously, we have concerns about access to the property for a lot of different reasons, but we certainly recognize that the township is going to have to, as I would expect would be the case in any application for anything, the township is going to have to review the material and reach its own conclusions about that material.
So is there anything further that you would like to bring to our attention about this engineering report, or do you believe it will be sufficient that the yellow highlighted areas will raise the issues you feel we need to look at when we have the opportunity to read this at a later time?
So it's not the intent that the yellow highlighted areas are the only portions of the report that the HARB and that the HARB should consider. Rather, it's the entirety of the report. It's cost information, which we will be able to submit to the township. In highlighting this material, I was simply raising points for discussion this evening. I did not intend that we would go through this in any high level of detail. I do want to point out, though, on the last page, the engineer's conclusion, and that is, as you can see it there, I'll characterize this report as the tip of the iceberg, because as he notes, there are a large number of structural issues, and he reaches the conclusion that the severity and magnitude of the problems is such that rehabilitation is cost prohibitive. He does point out that the true nature of everything that would need to be rehabilitated at the structure would not be known until the work pursuant to this report were to begin. So the cost figure that the trust has presented, this $200,000 to $270,000 cost figure, is just the tip of the iceberg when you consider that cost information coupled with the area engineering report. So what I'd like to know is if you're able to tell us what specific information you would like for us to provide. Obviously, we're going to send over this report. We can provide you with confirmation of the work that has been done, the foundation work that has been done, along with the timeframes within which that work happened, although I don't know that I fully see the relevance of that, but we'll provide it. What other information, if any, do members think would be important? If we have it, we'll provide it. If we don't have it, we can consider whether or not it's something that we can obtain.
I'm curious
And then we can talk about, what kind of actual physical inspection of the property makes sense, again, given the concerns that, for obvious reasons, there are concerns about just having people wander through the structure.
I'm curious if an inspection was done when the property was purchased, and I'm also curious to see if we couldn't get a list of the maintenance that has been done since the property was purchased. Ongoing maintenance is always required.
Okay.
I think to some degree, it's going to be a little difficult to give you a final list of questions in response.
I'm not asking for, I'm sorry. I wasn't asking for a final list, just.
No, but I'm just saying that only because it's quite possible questions will arise upon review of the information submitted.
Okay, I will note that the Mr. Vogels has been through the property, I believe on at least one occasion. So there's that existing knowledge base there already. But again, I'm not here to suggest that the township is not within its rights to confirm the information that the applicant is providing. I think that's within the normal course of conduct.
That is correct. I was allowed to go into the structure once to see if the roof was leaking. It was made very clear to me that I was only supposed to look at the roof and not spend much time looking at anything else in the structure. So I would not call it a typical inspection.
Mr. Vogels, what did you see relative to the roof, and when did you go through it? Through the
This
house?
was, boy, I couldn't give you a date, Lou.
No, I didn't.
But it was raining very hard. The roof was supposed to have been fixed, and there was a fair amount of water still coming in on the upper level in the back of the house. So it was evident that it was not repaired properly.
This was 2 years ago, maybe, or would you guess?
A year and a half. It's something to that effect.
Okay.
Chuck, I'll put you on the spot. You're our architect. Are there any other things that come to mind?
Right now, I mean, I'm interested in seeing that there's been some attempt at just simply maintenance, and I'd like to see a timeline when they purchased, if we have any information from that standpoint.
I think actually, I can tell you, if I can believe what I read at the Recorder of Deeds, that it was not a purchase per se, but the property was acquired by the trust in consideration for, I forget what the exact wording is. Maybe I've written it down here.
You did somewhere. It was almost like a trade
Well,
with
it
Wilkinson's or
was
something.
essentially, there was for relief of an obligation that
Yes.
Wilkinson was under. And I believe that Wilkinson was probably in a position, I get the sense that Wilkinson was in a position of possibly losing another property, being forced to make good on the debt in another property, and that's how this was required. So it was not I don't believe it was a sale as such, Chuck.
There
I can
still
tell
might
you,
have
I can
been
tell
an
you that
inspection.
there was no inspection done of the property at the time of acquisition.
At the time of acquisition, do you think your client was aware that this was a contributing building to the historic district?
I do not know the answer to that.
Okay.
Actually, Lou, I don't really.
But let me point out, it is a contributing resource in the district. So
I mean, the historic district existed significantly before the trust acquired the property in 2010.
that we can agree on. If nothing else this evening, we can agree on that. That there's whether or not the trust knew that the condition of the property. I'm sorry, whether or not the trust knew about the existence of the historic district.
I think we can just set that aside for the moment. Is there, but to given the fact that we're going to have to review the information, is there anything else beyond this engineering study and you suggested a contractor's cost estimate, if I heard you correctly?
We can provide cost information for what these elements of renovation would be expected to cost. Yes.
Right.
And I think that's part of what the ordinance calls out. The ordinance calls out, the question that the ordinance requires to be answered is not whether or not there's trust or distrust, is not whether or not people like Mr. DeFrancesco or don't, or whether or not he was aware of the existence of the district or not. The question that the ordinance calls out is whether or not the property can be renovated and rehabilitated in a manner which will result in an economically feasible rate of return for the property owner. And I'm paraphrasing the ordinance, but that's the central question that the ordinance poses. And we believe that after review of this information and the additional information, we'll be happy to talk to you about what's already been done and to show you those photographs. But we think that a dispassionate and objective analysis of that information, which is what's required, a dispassionate and objective analysis of that information will lead to the conclusion that putting, and I'll just use $200,000, putting $200,000 into this property to begin work, because again, as the engineer concludes, there's no way of knowing until you actually get in there what would be truly required. $200,000 to begin work will not result in an economically feasible rate of return. That is not said with any denigration or lack of respect for the fact that the history which you recited at the beginning of the meeting is accurate. Nobody's questioning whether or not there should be a Campbellsville Historic District or whether or not this is truly properly within the district. The facts that will be presented, however, are that the property is in a condition now that economically feasible renovation is highly unlikely. But again, as the ordinance calls out, we've begun a process, and that process requires that the applicant and HARB engage in a conversation about how we're all going to move forward. The ordinance calls out the possibility of HARB proposing alternatives to demolition, all of which we should be talking about.
So,
I have a question, if I could ask you, Mr. Gill. So your client has owned the property for how long?
I do not have the
I believe
deed
it
in
would be
front of
Right,
me,
well,
but
my
it's been
next question-
several years.
Several years, so several years, like 5 years, 10 years. So my question is this, is that did the tenant live in the property when your client owned it?
Yes,
Okay, did that person, that family, put any indication that repairs needed to be made while they lived there?
I do not know the answer to that question. But
So my
but I will
question,
find out.
okay, so my question to you is the process doesn't start now. The process started when your client bought the property or received the property or whatever. So it's not that the property's in disrepair now. Was the property in disrepair when your client owned it in the beginning? Did it continue to be in disrepair while the tenant lived there? Did it continue to deteriorate after the tenant left? And now you're saying we are now here at this position now saying that the property needs to be demolished. That's my question. And that's what my question is to you. It's not now, it started when you bought the property.
So I'm not aware of any structural engineering analysis that had been done when Wilkinson owned the property.
I'm not talking
And-
about when Wilkinson owned the property. I'm talking about when your client owned the property. Did the tenant complain about leaking roofs, things that were happening structurally when they lived there?
I don't know the answer to that question. I will get you an answer to that question.
Thank you.
there
To
is some,
continue my answer, however,
yeah.
I'm not aware that Wilkinson had any structural analysis done, but we do know that at the time of the approval of the subdivision and land development application, there was at least the work that is outlined on the note on the plan. There was at least a requirement that portions of the roof, or an acknowledgement that the roof needed to be replaced, at least in part. There was at least an acknowledgement that brick mortar joints needed to be repointed. I'm obviously just reading from the list here. So the answer to your question, Ms. Latimer, is these issues go back for a period of, some of these issues go back for a period which predates the trust's ownership. And that much we should all be able to agree on, because there it is. But I will get you an answer to the rest of your question.
Well, this is a question for Mark. I have a question for Mark then. So if the client gets the property from Wilkinson and it has problems, do the problems go away because there's been a transfer of ownership, Mark?
No, the problems don't go away. No, the transfer of ownership shouldn't make much of a difference, other than the fact that now the current applicant was the owner that had the ability to take action to maintain, the property. And certainly looking at the note, there was an acknowledgement that something needed to be done out there. And if it wasn't done now, it would have to be done when the plan was ultimately recorded.
I would also like to add to that thought process that this is not about structural. This is a zoning item, and it's about visual. So repointing is a visual thing. New roof is a visual thing. Shutters clearly are never going to be structural, therefore it's in there also. So, this is about bringing it up to a higher level of visual, not structural.
Sure, I agree with that. The point that I'm making is that, and I'll use the same phrase I used earlier when referring to the area report, this can be certainly seen as tip of the iceberg. But the issues that are noted in the area report go far deeper than what's noted on the plan note. Mark, I'll just point out one thing, that the note didn't call for the work to be done at plan recordation. It calls for the work to be done at the time that the new single family homes would be constructed. But again, I think that's not here. That's not what we're here. That's not what we're here talking about.
I would like to add something at this point. Wilkinson is obviously very familiar with the contracting and house building business, and they were agreeing at the time of this land development approval to proceed at maintaining this house. If Wilkinson was willing to do that and agree to this, it would be assumed that they already understood the structural quality of that structure, or they wouldn't have agreed to this. So that leads me to believe that if there's structural damage now, it's simply because it has been neglected for all these years.
Well, we can agree to disagree on whether or not we can make evidentiary assumptions about what Wilkinson did or did not know. But again, I don't know that that is the core question before that ultimately HARB will have to make a recommendation on, and the board will ultimately have to make a decision.
So, Mr. Gill, if we could sidestep some of this for the moment. When you were talking some time ago, you mentioned briefly alternatives to demolition.
Well,
if I heard correctly, and if there are alternatives to demolition, then we certainly would like to know about them.
I'm not aware of any alternatives to demolition based on the cost numbers that I've heard and the substance of the area engineering report. But my reference to alternatives is a reference to section 601(5) of the ordinance, which states, should the application be for demolition, HARB may request that the Board of Supervisors, HARB may request the Board of Supervisors for a delay of demolition to work, and time periods noted there, to work with the applicant to explore all alternatives to demolition. So that was, I was simply.
So I'm uncertain then as to what we're discussing here, because if you're saying there are no alternatives to demolition, I am unclear as to why this section is being raised.
It's a section in the ordinance that governs the process that.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it. We're familiar with it. I've been through a demolition request. So I'm just, you mentioned it, and so I'm just a little perplexed at the moment as to where that was going, because I must say the idea that there would be an alternative to demolition does intrigue me.
Well, again, I've been through demolition applications before. I've sat on the side of the table representing a municipality in HARB proceedings, and I've represented applicants in HARB proceedings. And one of the things that I've learned is that it's dangerous to develop hardened positions straight away because sometimes a municipality will say, property owner, you can't, you're not eligible for grant funding for renovation and rehabilitation, but we as a municipality are, and we're going to explore that. And maybe at that point in time, the municipality simply, and again, obviously I haven't discussed any of this with the client, but you've all been through that sort of consultative, iterative process that happens over the course of the period of time that the ordinance lays out.
Well,
I've been part of those processes as well. My point is your ordinance, which is written in the same way as most HARB ordinances, your ordinance is written in a way that encourages dialogue and conversation. And I'm coming to this with my client to begin that conversation. And it's my hope, and I know it's the client's hope, that we have that conversation, that we try to get to a point where we both recognize that we're all operating in good faith going forward, and that we ultimately either reach a decision that the engineering report is accurate. Maybe there's some things that another engineer would say, no, you don't really need to do that. Maybe there's some things that another engineer would say, hey, area didn't mention this, but now that I'm looking at it, yeah, you do need to do that. Maybe we'll disagree on the cost, but at the end of the day, either you're going to have to recommend that demolition is appropriate because there's no feasible rate of return available here, or you're going to have to recommend that demolition is not appropriate, but make some recommendation to the Board of Supervisors about what they should do. I'm here to have that conversation with you.
With what you said in mind and trying to bite my tongue a little bit, I might say that your client had all the time in the world to reach out to the HARB and see what could be done to stabilize the property and get a few estimates from people that we know, because a lot of us have old houses, to get in there and see what would be needed, for instance, to stop the leaking roof that Mr. Vogel saw when he entered the place. And I'm going to suggest that some of us be allowed to get some contractors that we know that are resourceful and pretty cost effective at what they do to view the property and see what the cost would be. Then we'd all know what we're dealing with. I don't know that the place is ready to fall down. I certainly don't want it to fall down. But I don't want to hold somebody's feet to the fire to try and shore up the House of Usher either, if it's ready to fall down, like some of the ones in Philadelphia do.
And we respect that. That's the whole point of the process that is outlined in the ordinance.
All right. So, I appreciate your emphasis on the process. And to that end, perhaps we could anticipate reading what we need to read from your client. And perhaps right now, we could just pull together a short to-do list of what we should be expecting and what we would like to achieve in terms of having, say, an engineer and a contractor take a look at the property, and develop an agreed upon list that we can then go forward on over the next month and resume this conversation after we have accomplished the goals on that list.
I think that would be, again, I keep coming back to the process.
I understand, yes. And so if that's agreeable to you, I would like to check to see that my solicitor believes I'm taking a sensible approach and that my members are in agreement with me before we suspend discussion, construct this list, and move forward over the next month. Mark, if I may poll you first.
I have no problem with that concept, Mr.
Okay.
Lagasse. I would suggest that the board also review the documents that Mr. Gill has presented, and I would say that, Mike, you don't have anyone else, you don't have any testimony, so to speak. I know no one's under oath, but you don't have the individual that generated that report that the board could ask questions of, do you?
No, not tonight.
Okay.
So, Mark, when you're saying review, you mean review these documents now because they're very difficult to read under this situation.
Oh, no, I mean, not at this minute. No, I mean,
Yeah, I didn't. I
sometime
was
between
hoping
now
you
and your
did
next
not
meeting.
mean that. I
Right.
wanted to clarify
Right.
that, however. Chuck, is this approach agreeable to you?
It is, and I want to make sure that everybody realizes that we're talking about only a portion of the entire value of of the property, because the property is part of a subdivision. And part of that approval was the fact that there was a historic structure on the subdivision. And as a matter of fact, we looked at this subdivision just recently and reapproved it because it was a historic property on it.
Jeff?
So-
Oh, sorry, Chuck.
My point is that if we're not looking at it for the value of the individual house.
Right. I understand.
It's got greater value.
Jeff, this approach is agreeable to you?
Yes, it is, Paul.
Okay, I'm just polling everybody because I hate Zoom meetings. What can I tell you? Lou, this is agreeable to you?
Sounds like a plan forward, sure.
Okay. Mr. Gill, can you yield the screen, by the way? I can see all my members better then.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
There we go.
And Dan, this is agreeable to you?
Yes, it's agreeable to me.
Okay. So what I want is a list that we're all agreed upon. We've been talking about these things in process. So let's start with a report, the engineer's report, and contractor report, and any other written materials. I don't want to have them show up during the meeting the next time we meet. We need to be able to have the opportunity to review these materials in advance of the meeting, or it's just an abstract discussion of no use to anyone.
Understood.
Okay. We want to arrange for a contractor and engineer chosen by the township to have a look at the building, and that includes the inside of the building. And if necessary, if your client feels it's necessary, we'll talk about waiving him of responsibility for possible injury, because I realize you have concerns about safety, but obviously your engineer was able to get into there relatively recently.
Yeah, at the very least, and I'll speak with Mr. DeFrancesco about this. And I think Mark and I can come to pretty readily come to an understanding of what form of insurance coverage or evidence of township's insurance will be necessary in order for that to proceed. But you've captured the essence of the concern about just having people who aren't our contractors going through there.
Okay. So did we have other things that we needed notes on in terms of materials or access, et cetera?
The actual application, right?
By the actual application, oh, the COA application. Yeah, we don't
Yes.
have that in hand. we do, I was thinking of the demolition permit application. Thank you, Chuck. But the township should have that somewhere because Mark
The
was.
township has that, yes.
Yes. But yes, we need to get access to that. I don't know where that's gotten to. I take it that was a PDF file, Mr. Gill?
It is.
If you would simply do me, Mark, would you have it?
I do, yeah, no, I forwarded it to Joan and I can certainly forward it to
Can you
you.
just forwarded it to me directly, Mark?
I have it right here. I can just email it to you this very moment if you
No,
like.
if Mark has it, Mark can send it to me. He has my
Okay.
email address.
Okay.
That's fine. I don't need you. Is there anything else I'm missing?
I have a question. This list we're forming right now, we're going to have time to revise that after we read this engineering's report.
Yes, we need to recognize that, as I said earlier in this meeting, that our questions are incomplete at this moment because we have a report in front of us that is a little, let's just say it would make me squint a whole lot, and it's not feasible to read it on the screen. And my assumption is that there will probably be some questions related to it that we may want to ask and have answered, or it may prompt a request for some other documents. Now, which reminds me that Nan is also indicated that she would like some understanding of the maintenance history of this property.
That's correct.
Right. And so we would like to have what you have that your client has that can show us that.
And the maintenance history should include any requests by tenant who live there about improving the property.
And because I'm playing multiple roles here, I hope that you will bear with me a little, and I will review the video and see if there's anything else we've missed, because I'm not very good at talking, taking notes on the fly, and managing entrances to Zoom meetings all at the same time.
Understood.
But if I will make one more last request of my members, if they remember anything else that they had requested that I failed to note.
Now you requested for
Contractor.
another contractor and maybe another engineer or whatever to go.
Yes,
through the whole
an
building.
engineer and a contractor to examine the interior. Yes.
I'd feel a lot better in the confidence of whatever we do, that then we'd have full knowledge of the property, much better
Right.
knowledge than we do now.
Okay. So for the moment, I think we can simply table this discussion and resume it next time, assuming that we can accomplish all of this. And I recognize that we have a holiday season coming up, but I trust our members will give it their full efforts.
Understood, and we appreciate that, and thank you very much. Mark, if you have time and we can talk tomorrow, let's talk about how this information is going to be provided and shared, and what the use of the information is going to be, especially in the context of the pending proceedings before the district justice. That's a summary criminal proceeding, so I want to have a very clear understanding about any information that the applicant provides at this point in time, and what the, again, the scope of the use of that information. But again, I think that's a conversation we can have offline.
That's fine, Mike. We can certainly reach agreement on an accommodation.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And we'll be talking.
All right, thank you all. Good evening, or good night.
Okay, so I note that Sarah Beth Kohat and Sally's iPad, is that Sally Gallagher?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, so I'd like you, now that we're meeting as the full HARB and Historical Commission joint meeting, we'll be moving on to other topics. Jeff, if you would just stay with us until we approve the minutes from the last meeting. Nan, don't disappear too quickly.
Paul, do you need me?
No, I don't.
Okay.
That's what's going to be the next item I was.
All right, great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Have a nice evening,
All
Mark.
right,
to
you
see you,
too.
Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with us.
No problem.
So you, all members should have received a copy of the draft minutes for the meeting of Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. And to start this, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I was not there.
What?
I don't think I was there.
Perhaps you weren't. No, you were not. How about Nan or Lou? How about a motion from one of you?
I copied a lot of papers today, but I didn't copy them. I'm sorry.
Ah, well, I did send these out.
I know you did, and I
We're
copied
supposed to read
everything
these.
recently, but I'm sorry. I didn't bring those.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the
Approve.
minutes as written.
I would like to have a little discussion. I would like to suggest a change to the minutes in the second paragraph under call to order, that Bill Smith be identified as the representative of the property owner of 1731 New London Road. I would like, on the third page, final paragraph, third line, the word applications, which is two words in on the right, should be singular application, not plural. And on the last page, under section D, the word meeting should be meetings, as it should not be some of the meeting. And since I did most of the work on these, that's my failing. So, do I hear a second? What, can I ask Chuck to amend his motion to?
Anybody can do it, right? And I wasn't actually there, so.
Yeah,
If you need me to,
all
I
I
will.
want you to do now is amend your motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I amend my motion to as amended.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor signify by raising a hand. I don't care which one it is, but one that I can see. Thank you. That would be unanimous. All right. Let me find my agenda again. And note that. All right, I have a.
So that-
You may
Pardon me,
go,
Paul,
Jeff.
but
Yes,
I'm all done now.
you're all done. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night,
everybody have a
Jeff.
good-
Good night.
So, item under old business, the first item, historic resources map. Where this sits now is I have submitted all the changes to the map that are needed by the Chester County Planning Commission except one. That concerns a parcel that forms part of the Strawbridge property north of Strickersville Road between Mount Olivet and Walker. This parcel has improbable addresses, and the township is working with the folks at Chester County 911 to give it a sensible address. When that is accomplished, we say good night, goodbye, and please don't come back to the historic resources map. But yes, I need some input back from the Chester County Planning Commission, but Karen Marshall was pleased with it. So we'll see what finally happens. But essentially this is done, except for this one parcel, after a very long time. Any comments from anyone about the historic resources map? I know, Sally, you're not at all familiar with this. I can send you a PDF file if you like, so you can see what we've been working on off and on.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. And by the way, everyone, Sally, this is the first time I'm seeing your face.
Yeah.
Spoken with you. So this is Sally Gallagher. This is so bizarre to introduce and welcome a new member of the Historical Commission via Zoom. And as I mentioned to everyone else, Liz Ranby, who did serve on both the commission and the HARB, has resigned, and she's moving. And so she's disappeared in the middle of COVID and Zoom too. And if I may just mention Victoria Knotts here, who is attending because she may be interested in becoming a member. So the next item on our agenda is the Churchill African Cemetery. And I'm sure Dan could say some choice words about this, but I would just like to begin by saying that Nan and I went up on Saturday morning to visit the cemetery again. And I had last been there 3 years ago when I would describe the site as reasonably well cleared, and you know, it's wooded and we could do nothing about that. There are leaves that fall from the trees, and that's a problem. But it was simply a bramble infested mess, and it was depressing and dismaying. And we need to do something about it. It's not a theoretical problem anymore.
Well, I'll mention that I was surprised. It was my first visit there because it's just a very small little piece of property kind of up on the hill from Churchill Road. And it was a mess. It's wild olive, which had been cut, but that stuff, when you cut it, it grows faster. So it was, you know, it had covered the area. Someone had been there. There were daylilies and there were some hosta and stuff that had been cared for, but then it had been neglected again. The difficulty with the property is that there are some tombstones that are obviously tombstones, but there are some rocks there that you wonder whether they are also markers. So the area has to be carefully cleared and taken a look at, because those could be markers as well. I found it very interesting. It was not what I expected. It really is kind of carved on the side of a hill, and it's very small, but we should do something to clear it out, definitely.
Yeah, Nan and I talked a little bit about what might be done while we were looking at it. It's the sort of job that we will not be able to do sensibly with mechanical equipment for fear of damaging hidden tombstones or grave markers that we're simply not aware of due to brush and leaf cover. So it will need to be done by hand. It will probably make most sense to do it by sections. And there's no reason not to believe that we could not spend all summer doing it. which is probably enough negatives in one sentence for anybody, but it's a big job. And maybe something that we can do with the aid of a Boy Scout troop. We have no reason to believe that the property is not abandoned, but we have not completed a deed search because of COVID and other things prior to that. But I have a greater sense of urgency about attacking this. I was simply dismayed. When I'd been there before, it was, as I say, it was a wooded location, but it was not a mess of brambles, impossible to walk around.
There are some interesting folks that are there. There's at least two men that fought in the Civil War. That is interesting. So there's history there. I mean, there's definitely more than just to clear because it's a cemetery. There's some history there that we could research. I found it fascinating.
I wanted to say, wasn't that a Boy Scout project many years ago? They took care of the steps leading up to the cemetery, just as a matter to point that out. I live very close to that.
No, the steps are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've washed away. It could have been, but I guess the problem is because it's wild olive, so it was cut. But once you cut that stuff, then instead of getting one branch, you get 16, and that's
Yeah.
what's happened. So it needs to be cut and it needs to be wiped down with Roundup so it doesn't come back.
Right. Either that, or you can put stump killer on.
Whatever, it needs to be killed
Yeah.
because,
So it won't
once
come
you
back.
cut it, it's like, haha, you cut me. I'm going to come back, 10 times as big. And that's
Right.
what happened. And that's why it was disappointing because it was covered with the wild olive.
Yeah.
But interesting. It was interesting. I mean, the markers are interesting. The history was there. Where the church was, we don't know. There was a book that I found in my bookcase. I don't know how I got it, called Walk the Line, that actually mentioned it. That said they used to have revivals there, and cited that there was some newspaper articles on it. So this winter, it's on my project to get on Ancestry.com and see if I can't find those. So, where did the people come from? Our family looking for those grave markers, that sort of thing. It's fascinating. Not a lot of graves. We found what, Paul, 10 maybe we found that we thought
I think
were
it were,
graves.
yeah, I think there was one stone I was looking for that I remembered being partially in the clutches of a tree that I could not find again this time.
We found 5 or 6 or 10 that were actually.
I think there was close to certainly 8 to 10 and some potential grave markers that were rough stones. But there's information based on death certificates at Find a Grave. And I've just made a note to myself to send everybody this link that would suggest there could be 70 burials there.
70,
Wow.
really.
Yeah.
I was going to say the Find a Grave that cemetery has come up on there because
I looked for it. I couldn't find it, but I'll look again. I don't know.
I thought it did. It's been a
No,
while.
Paul said
No,
it did. You're right.
it's there. It's there. But it's not necessarily. Maybe if you search on Churchill, Franklin Township, something like that.
I searched one of the graves and he didn't come up. The Boyd I forget his first name, Mr. Boyd. I searched for him and he didn't come up on Find a Grave. So anyways, but we should clean that up. So if somebody's looking for their family members, they could find it, because there were at least 2 or 3 markers with the last name of Boyd, B-O-Y-D.
So I hope that in the spring, because I really don't want to go in there, and I would like to cut things back when it's growing so that we can see what's live and what's not and kill it and then see if it comes back rather than starting now. And with luck, and luck is looking good, we may have, some of us vaccinated by then if things go well. My wife might be anyway. She's a healthcare worker. And but we can get it out there in a spaced sort of way and start accomplishing something, divided into subsections that can be worked on. But we have a project.
Sometimes it's
if we
easier
do-
to see that after a hard frost, isn't it? Or it might maybe go out there in January, or just to take a walk around and see whether we can maybe find the graves easier, at least rake around them a little bit. And then
It's
Not that kind of brush.
it's not that kind of brush.
It's way
Okay.
hardy. It's like,
Okay.
there's also
I
a
haven't
lot
been
of
there.
there's a lot of catbrier in there and other thorny vines.
Hmm.
no
So
poison ivy. No.
Oh.
poison
I didn't see any
Well, that's
poison ivy,
good.
and someone who's quite sensitive, I'm quite observant usually. But it's not something it's not a place you can walk around casually. We will have to cut our way in, I think, and make pathways divided into sections and then attack each section, sort of gridded out by pathways so that we have some easy access.
But the easiest time to do that will be before things start to grow. So late, like March or
Okay.
April, it's 1/3 the work. 1/3 the work.
Then if we paint the stumps, it will kill it too. It's because it's starting to grow.
I would like them to be, I think it would just be better if we get in there when things are greening up because it's active. And if I treat, the cut ends of some of these, olives and other things, that they will be dead. I want to know that I'm not doing work for nothing. I'm afraid that if I do it when it's dormant, it won't absorb the poison I'm feeding it.
Well, but it's a lot easier to cut it before it starts to grow.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot easier to cut
Yeah.
it before
So
it starts
if we
to grow.
go in there in March, when it's just starting to wake up, but not quite fully awake, we can kill it, cut it and kill it, hopefully.
And then you can put whatever you're
Kill it
talking
while
about on the
it's
stumps.
sleeping, huh?
Yeah, well, you can put the stuff on after the growing season comes.
Well, I would treat any cut surface simply because
I would.
you're going to have your best opportunity and then we'll go back. The other thing that this visit made clear to me is that we cannot consider it sort of one and done. This is going to require annual visits.
Yep. All right. Well, it was interesting. So it was very interesting to go.
And the second topic is other township cemeteries. And right now, I don't necessarily have a lot to say about this. We've discussed it before, but it's on here because some of them are also issues. And ultimately, we need to develop a plan for responsible care for these if the township has indeed become the primary caretaker by default.
Shouldn't we locate the property lines? Isn't that like the very first thing we need to do?
They were staked on this one. To start to. I don't know if the stakes are still there. Obviously,
Are they wood or are they metal?
when they were put in, they were wood. They were
Mhm.
3 years ago, 2017.
Yeah.
Maybe spring of 2017.
What would it take to? Well, we should probably get real monuments in there.
You're right. And they ought to have been put in there, I would have thought, but whether they're there or not, I don't know.
This wasn't a subdivision, was it?
No, but it was just
So
a sale.
then
They
it
would
wouldn't-
not have put them in for a property sale.
No.
Yeah.
No, only subdivisions does that come up. So
Well, the other option too is to see what problems, if any, the owner of the parcel that surrounds it would have if we should just stray over the property lines in our cleanup. Since it's a wooded area and since it's a, the stuff that's in there is kind of invasive, if we can come to an agreement with the property owner, we may be okay.
Yeah, but shouldn't we protect the property by
I
establishing
understand that, but my first concern is making sure we don't aggravate the neighboring property owner. You know what I'm saying? But you raised another issue in my mind, and I want to make sure that we're not causing problems for ourselves.
No, I agree.
So I have a question. Would that be privately owned, the cemetery?
So the cemetery was privately owned. The owners were the trustees of the Churchill African Union Church, which acquired the property in the, I want to say late 1840s. But I'd have to look over the notes that I don't have in hand. According to the records we are aware of, the property was never sold. So it remains in the hands of the trustees. The church always owned it, okay? So what it has become is an abandoned burial ground. And ultimately, abandoned burial grounds become the responsibility of the municipality in which they are, although that would have to be forced through a petition. So given that that's the ultimate result, and given that we can do with it volunteers, I'm sure the township would be happy for us to step up and see what we can do without petitioning them, et cetera. Because we can get started, as long as there's no indication, I'm sure the county would be happy to tax anyone who owned the land if there was a taxable owner.
Yeah.
And there is no taxable owner listed on the tax records.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that the county, it's not a big parcel, it's less than a half of an acre.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I've gone and looked at that but there's only so much that one can determine online from home, and it really needs a trip to the archives to do the deed research to show that it was never sold and it's abandoned.
How far from the intersection of Hilltop is it?
It's kind of right there.
Okay.
It's
Just up the hill a little bit on Churchill.
yeah, it's basically 100 feet, 200
Okay.
feet at most.
Okay, that's close
And
enough.
in
Yeah.
fact, it's misleading a little bit because the place where you climb the bank in order to get to the property now is almost invisible, and it's up a little ways, but the property is much larger than that. So it goes both, I guess, would that be north and south of that point? I'm not sure. But it's the property is on either side of the entry point. It's actually much more readily accessible if you walk up the neighbor's driveway and
Walk down.
which is why having their cooperation would be desirable. Because clearing some of that stuff out of there is going to be a problem. I would not want to be throwing it down onto the road if I could avoid it. So the next topic is 896 road work in a walkable Kemmelsville, and there's not really a whole lot going on with this at the moment. It's part of the discussions that are going on at the comprehensive plan task force meetings. I keep trying to remember what the correct phrase is. There was some interest expressed in aspects of a walkable Kemblesville in the meetings, but it was neither in the meetings nor in the township survey results was it the first item on most people's agenda, which is unsurprising because most people do not live in Kemblesville. But I think in the long run, in terms of expanding a trail network and that sort of thing and linking them up, Kemblesville is going to become something of a semi-central point for that. But for the moment, there's nothing really to discuss about that. That's on the agenda. Remind us it's there and not to forget about it.
Anything on the intersection of 841 and 896? Is that going to stay the way it is? They want to put a light there like they once did?
No, it's a traffic circle.
The circle.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's a traffic circle.
So that's what they want to do? That's definitely planned, or is it a concept?
Yes, that's definitely planned as things stand now. I don't know when the work will begin, and I think that, it will be interesting to see how that fits in the landscape, but
I can't quite visualize that myself.
there's going to be a lot of shifting of dirt to raise the downhill side of
Yes.
But it was my understanding that some of the intersection's neighbors found that preferable to a traffic light.
Oh, I don't think a traffic light's a good idea. I
Hmm.
never did. But the stop signs are working now,
I
as far as I
know.
can tell.
The issue with the stop signs has a lot to do with the fact that the project is federally funded. And even if they were going to keep the stop signs, they were going to create a traffic light footprint in the road, which is to say that they were going to do turn lanes on the road so that because the stop signs are there in expectation of the eventual installation of a traffic light. They were always shoehorned in on that basis. So that's sort of why the traffic light is a sort of 800-pound gorilla for the intersection. But the traffic circle will change that. And I guess we will see over time. It's going to be hard to undo if it's not well liked.
That's for sure.
As for talks and training, well, we're not hosting any talks with New London, and I'm be willing to put on money that we will not be hosting talks with New London till next fall at best. But I am posting talk opportunities online on Facebook, both on the Franklin Township Historical Commission Facebook page and also through the Landenberg site, and I think it's the Franklin Township Facebook page too. There's a Landenberg page and a Franklin Township page. Anyway, I post them in 3 locations, and they're out there, and I've got a couple to put up tonight. Now, for new business, we've dealt with item A, the COA review. The next item that I put on this is Kemblesville Historic District, raising awareness of its history. Longer term, I would like us to think about raising the awareness starting with Kemblesville residents and then district residents and then the township of large, just making people aware of our history. I've come to realize from hearing some of the comments in the task force breakout rooms during the community meeting that people just really aren't aware that you know, at times, I mean, we have old buildings, but people aren't aware of the history. And I think we can move beyond raising, beyond the Campbellsville Historic District to raising the township history generally. And we've done it by handing out histories at election time. But this was not something we did this year because of the epidemic and the large mail-in vote. So we will do that again. And one of the things I was talking, I think actually with Chuck,
Yeah, it was me.
just on the phone conversation. And one of the things he suggested that I thought was a good idea is getting some historical paraphernalia, photos, the like, into local businesses like our wineries, where people might actually take some time to sip a glass of wine and look at what's on the wall and wonder what it is they're looking at. And perhaps, given what I've just done for the parks, we could also put a little QR code on there that would lead people to a history or something like that. So this is the longer term thing. This is not something I'm hoping to accomplish immediately, but we've been a little moribund in terms of doing this kind of stuff, and I'd like us to get a little more active again. Our energy runs in cycles. Mine right now is ebbing really low thanks to a lot of work, but I'm going to be retired soon, so I may have some free time on my hands. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I was observing that I go to the Landenberg store. I go to Landenberg a lot
Yes, the
more than I go
Landenberg
to-
stores is another
Yeah,
one.
so Landenberg store, I've been going there for 30 years. They always had pictures over the years. It's always been pictures or you know, little things that kind of told the story of what Landenberg was historically. And so you just absorb it over the year. I mean, you know, you're waiting for your sandwich. You walk over the wall, you look at it. You're picking out your candy, you walk over to the wall, you look at it. So yeah, anything in the Campbellsville area that like the wineries would be a great idea.
Yeah, we have postcards that have been shared with us. And there's no copyright on those postcards anymore. They're all like quite ancient at this point. And we can put their images on a sort of montage and print it out and put something like that up. Maybe even make a little booklet that and encourage people to steal it. Anything that I think, you know, we forget. We've been here a long time. Not me, none of us, but people have been in the township a long time. And I think it would be good to raise, you know, awareness of that, raise awareness of what that meant, of who was here, what they were doing, why some people were here, like the Scotch-Irish Presbyterians who were encouraged to settle here and on the south side of the Maryland border by the Calverts so that they would use their muscle to preserve Penn and Calvert claims. The Quakers weren't very big fighters, as you may all recall, but they could make friends with a tough crowd if they needed to. The township website is coming along, but the township, the historical website is going to remain separate. Dave, and I can't pronounce his name off the top of my head. Nan, are you Gerstenhaber?
Yeah, that's right. I call him Dave G.
Dave G, who is a supervisor, is actually doing at the moment the bulk of the work on it. And we were discussing the role that historical information was would play on the website, and he I was talking about layout and pointing out that, well, we'd done it differently on the other website. And I think he not only liked the way it looked, he was happy to realize that somebody else other than he was managing it. And as a result, it will continue to give us some flexibility in posting and control over the website. Not that it's a control thing, but if we want to tweak something, we can tweak it ourselves. And Sally and Victoria, just so you know, I'm the one who's managing it at the moment. So
Okay.
the township handed it off to me some time ago. I think they were, at the time, I think Frank Norris was managing it, and both Frank and the township were sort of happy to get rid of it. And I've learned to work within the system I've been handed, so I can keep adding stuff and make it reasonably attractive. And if you can encourage people to share old family photos that might be appropriate, old handbills. We don't need the originals, just a good quality scan. This is the really nice thing about the digital age. We don't, we can take a JPEG file and post it online, and the owner still has the original, and the township can enjoy the photo or the map or whatever as well. And, oh yes, constructing a more detailed township history. Well, that will come with time, but it needs to be done. And the township history we currently have is based on a township history that came out of the last comprehensive plan and has been updated. But as we do more research about say the Churchill Church or other locations, we need to incorporate this into the history. So you're all looking just a little sleepy and tired.
It's
So
a Zoom meeting.
yeah, well, actually, it's not too bad. I thought we'd go about 2 hours, and that's what we've done.
Yeah.
So if anybody would like to comment on these various items that were in the second half of our agenda, since the COA will be postponed for further study and review next time, I'd be happy to hear your comments, or if you would like to suggest other things that we should be talking about. Now is the time to speak up about that.
Can I get a copy of that map that you're putting together? The resource map.
Yes, thank you. I was trying to figure out which map, and I'm thinking, I didn't discuss the Rio's map or Whitmer's map, or yes, although it's not going to be very informative, probably. I'll send the map and the key, and both still are a little bit of a work in process because one of the resources has to be deleted from the map. That's the resource that it was an old house, not very old, but old, on the south side of Strickerville Road, where the parking lot now is, in the White Clay Creek Preserve. As you drive down toward the creek coming from Appleton Road, on the left-hand side, there's a gravel parking lot, and to its west, there is a linear stand of pine trees. And the linear stand of pine trees is the only thing that indicates there was once a house there. So when the property was acquired by the state for the park, one of the things they did fairly early on was tear down the house, but without letting anybody know. They didn't talk to the township. And so
Say that again?
So when DCNR, you want to know the location or which part of it?
Who tore down the house?
DCNR,
Okay,
Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.
okay.
The house was, there was nothing particularly special about the house, sort of four square, maybe concrete brick structure. And it had a scruffy farmstead associated with it, and it had been somewhat neglected. And it was not, part of a historic district or part of, we have no historic overlay. So, but I was surprised to learn that they'd simply torn it down without seeking a demolition permit. The township had no record of it whatsoever.
How old was it?
I'd have to look at the historic resource survey to see that. It would have been probably early 1900s
Okay,
because of the nature of the structure.
so they probably didn't even consider it that historic when they looked at it.
No, well, neither Longwood apparently doesn't consider anything post-colonial terribly historic, because they tore down those structures along Route 1.
Yes, and one was the chauffeur's house.
Yeah, it was a similar case here.
Yeah, quite a nice place.
I think they figured they couldn't turn it into any kind of, say, ranger's office or something like that. And they just decided this was the simple solution. But that's kind of why the parking lot is there, because there was a house there. So.
That's why the salt shed is here.
Yes, indeed.
Sorry.
Anyway, so if there are no further comments, we can adjourn at 9:03. And I'm just going to end the meeting for all, and you're going to get bounced out. Have a nice Thanksgiving if I don't see you until the next meeting. In December, only the HARB will have to meet, so we may not have a historical commission meeting, but historical commission members are welcome to attend if they wish. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you for hosting.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Sally, before you go, and actually Victoria, so Victoria, we still have spaces on the historical commission if you're interested in joining. You need not commit at this point, no pressure. And Sally, if you decide you are interested in joining the HARB, or if you don't and Victoria does decide she's interested, now with Liz Ranby's leaving, there is a space on the HARB as well. And since we hold the meetings concurrently, it's very easy to attend both.
Okay, I'll think about it.
Yeah,
Think about it. Thank you.
right. There's no rush to give me an answer. I just thought I'd point that out.
Okay.
All right, you all take care.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.